Carlos. I'm a husband with two amazing boys. In my off time, I'm an attorney for the Children's Division, and I have the privilege of being on the board of directors at Rainbow House. And hopefully next month I'll be able to say that I'm a guardian ad litem. This is my external appearance. This is what you see. I'm no fan of public speaking, let alone confiding in you, a room full of people, most of whom I've never met, that I've been victimized. Although I prefer the word survivor. But if being vulnerable would mean the horrors I suffered were not in vain, then I must stand before you and share a piece of my journey. And I say just a piece, because I've never made a full disclosure, even after 2 decades of everything that I endured. Disclosure is a process. I'll apologize in advance because I'm going to get a little heavy, but it's necessary to convey the powerful difference you are making just by your mere presence here tonight, and to a greater extent what you will do moving forward. Like a deep and jagged laceration to the hand, with the wound reopened and bleeding every time you use it, rendering you partially disabled or forever in pain, these acts of abuse and neglect operate as wounds of the mind, as a child attempts to navigate the stressors of life. Seemingly normal interactions, daily occurrences like opening a door, hearing a phone ring, changing your clothes, could operate as triggers, which cause that child to relive a trauma with as much realism, physiological, and psychological reactions as when the trauma was initially perceived. Like deja vu, imagine that worst experience in your life, multiply it, and envision it can come on at any moment with such a crippling ferocity that you are immobilized. You are reliving the moment and you can't get out. There's no switch to turn it off. Your mind cannot perceive the difference, and fight, flight, or freeze kicks in. Wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, irregardless of time, place, or task. Yet you must function like a normal person. How? Now, allow me to add a layer. Imagine a toddler who falls and scrapes their knee. Who do they turn to? They turn to their caregiver for support. But now imagine that toddler whose caregiver is turning to that child for gratification of a kind the child shouldn't even have to know about, have any knowledge about. Who does that child still turn to? That caregiver. How does anybody reconcile that? Turning to evil, harming you in the most heinous way for support. I have a question for you tonight. If it takes a village to raise a child, what does it take to raise and nurture a child victimized by abuse or neglect? Allow me to put a face on it. I grew up in Sacramento, California. My mother was on disability, and I had sisters, 2 sisters, including my father. And disability income does not go along with it. We were poor, but not homeless. We had food stamps when they actually came in books. My dad would sell them for cash, usually 50 cents on a dollar, and use that cash to buy alcohol. So the first 20 to 21 days of the month were horrible because he was an angry and abusive alcoholic. My father hated that my mom was his wife and that I was his son. So from the 2nd grade on, I don't think I ever started school on time because I was always healing for something. For the practitioners in the room, that's your educational neglect. One of the more memorable beatings I got was when I was put in a sleeping bag and beat with a wooden rod on which you hang your clothes in the closet. For the record, when you're in a sleeping bag, it's hard to see where the blows are coming from and it's difficult to block. Belts hurt, extension cords hurt more, belt buckles hurt worse. PVC pipes, although they make a funny noise when you hit someone in the head, I still have a dent in my skull from one of the beatings I got from that. And then being forced in a linen closet for hours on a shelf is very uncomfortable, but it's just one of those many creative punishments that I endured. And then there's all that profane verbal abuse that's great for confidence. I would never even make it in the military peeling potatoes. Debilitating emotional wounds. About every 6 months, my mom would try to run away. She would claim that her husband is trying to kill her, and that's important. My father would inform the authorities that my mom is diagnosed with several mental disorders, including paranoia. Authorities would try to find her, put her in a mental institution, and they would try to give her different medication. She would stay there a couple weeks to a month until she said that everything was in her head. Then she would go home after she recanted. Before coming home, there would be another form of abuse where my older sister would have to fulfill the womanly duties of my mother. I was very much aware of this, as I would often get displaced from my bunk bed, and I would try to sleep to the sounds as my father would make, taking advantage of my sister. It's just one of those things that's hard to sleep through. But this was normal. It was a frequent occurrence, a steady cycle. In the summer of 1998, a marital disagreement between my mother and father ended abruptly when a hammer held by my father made contact with the forehead of my mother. The DA declined to press charges. They didn't want us to go into the system. Let that sink in for a moment. It's better to put children in a home with a man who is undiagnosed as mentally disabled, with a woman who is diagnosed as mentally disabled, when that man hit that woman in the head with a hammer, than to put these children in the system. In the winter of 1998, my mother tried to escape through a bedroom window, thinking that my father was trying to kill her. I love you was not a phrase used often in our house, even if at all. I wish the day before my mother died that I had uttered those words, but I didn't know, and it wasn't exactly a loving household. My father had tied her up in a hog-tied position and continued his onslaught. He stood on the back of her head and spit on her face pressed against the floor. Rigor mortis is essentially the effect after death where muscles stiffen into whatever position they're in prior to death. The next day, although now untied, the fire department carried my mother and her soiled clothing out in the same hog-tied position in which she had perished. That is the last memory I have of my mom. I was 12. Although I was grilled by detectives, I didn't get one of those forensic interviews that Rainbow House does until later the following year. Instead, the next day I went to school, and the next week, and the next month. In fact, several months went by before I finally came into the system. And my sisters and I were separated, and we've never resided together since. And honestly, we remain estranged acquaintances to this day. I learned my younger sister was having a baby because of a picture she posted on Facebook. But once I got in the system at this point, I was pretty much emotionally numb, and I don't think I've ever recovered from that. But if you'll indulge me for a few minutes, I would actually like to share some of my accomplishments. I woke up today. I could probably say. But I woke up today and I was not scared. I'm not afraid to get out of bed. I'm not afraid to go to sleep. For this, I am grateful. Not every victim of abuse and neglect can say that. Despite my exposure to drugs in a group home, my dad's alcoholism, I woke up sober and not addicted to drugs. Not every victim of abuse and neglect can say that. I don't beat my wife or abuse my children. As you know, many have perpetuated the cycle. I woke up this morning in a bed that I own, in a home that I own, clean sheets, clean clothes. There are countless victims of abuse and neglect that can't say that, so I am very thankful. For those who share my background, these are great accomplishments. Today, I have not been hungry. I've had plenty of food, I'm healthy, and these are the types of things you can help a child in our community say through your support of Rainbow House. I woke up today a free man. I've been in handcuffs, and not the pink fuzzy kind, but the cold steel handcuffs of a police officer. However, it was because I was learning to be a police officer. I was trying to apply what I learned. In fact, I served almost 4 years as a full-time officer and 2 years as a reserve until law school. For this, I am grateful. Please know that my story, and I'm only sharing part of it tonight, pales in comparison to the atrocities suffered by other little girls and boys, infants. I look to them for strength. I have a brief digression and I'm almost done. I was getting kicked out of the system when I turned 18, just a few months before I graduated high school, and I have court records now to back it up. I was 4.0, varsity wrestling, an editor of my school paper. There are two people in this room that I must recognize. First is my wife for putting up with me and encouraging me to pursue law school. blessing me with two amazing boys and Elizabeth Moore. I've been forced to be homeless before graduating high school because the system had insufficient funds. I don't know where I'd be at today. So I thank both of you. She gave me a home, a chance to succeed, and I graduated valedictorian from Lincoln University. I look to her. I look to her for inspiration, especially being a survivor of cancer. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, the biggest barrier to helping kids is a lack of resources. Your presence here tonight states clearly you understand this is not just somebody else's problem. Luckily, our community has Rainbow House, with amazing people with hearts dedicated to repairing the lives of victimized children. I wonder what would have happened if there was a Rainbow House in my community, if things would have been different. I really needed a mother for so many reasons. However, Rainbow House cannot work to these ends without your support. I lack the words to articulate the gravity of what your contributions tonight can achieve. You're doing so much more than just making a positive difference. You are providing physical and psychological safety for children in all of our communities. In contrast, what did my village say after my father killed my mother? He finally did it. He finally killed her. It takes more than a village. It takes each and every one of you selflessly subordinating your wants or desires to the needs of innocent children, toddlers and babies alike, whose only infraction was being born in this world. They never asked to be born. They never asked to inconvenience or burden their caregivers. They never wanted to be the objects of inappropriate physical affection of their caregivers. You support Rainbow House, and Rainbow House provides the support, the needed services that so many of these kids desperately require. Children fall victim to family crisis, abuse, neglect, sextortion, child sex trafficking, quietly suffering these burdens. Too many unable to muster the courage to come forward, afraid to be vulnerable, carefully calculating that it is unwise for them to trade the devils they know for the unknown. You are helping to ensure that these children do not become victimized, and that these children receive services they need sooner. Please understand that complex, mind-blowing, heart-wrenching cases come through Rainbow House. You prevent these children's future victimization, drug use, incarceration, homelessness, and potentially worse. Every now and then we get a momentary glimpse into the lives of a family like this, and Rainbow House springs into action. And you become the authors of these kiddos' narratives through your support. I am trying to carry my burden and do my part by sharing my story, being vulnerable to everyone in this room. Tonight is one of the greatest single acts in my life in my fight for children, divulging that as a child, I lacked the ability to protect myself. I allowed myself to become victimized. I failed to protect my sisters. And I failed to prevent my mother from the death at the hands of my father. Despite my position and all my education, this is still how I, in part, view my past. And it's something that I can never erase. I already know you had intentions to make this a record-setting night at Rainbow House, but hopefully I did not become vulnerable in vain. I hope that you have been moved to give a little more than you intended, to go beyond that of an ordinary villager, to pick up a pen and draft a new future for these kids, to be the best superhero authors of their narratives. I'm cognizant of the fact that my ability to stand here before you tonight in and of itself is fairly unique. I cannot change the past, but together, we superhero authors will say what the future will be. And it starts right now. Rainbow House thanks you.